Good afternoon and welcome to CompanyRoots. Today we're interviewing Henry Elkus, the founder and CEO of Helena, an organization developing initiatives that tackle critical societal problems. Helena recruits and collaborates with leaders from various industries to address issues while also finding solutions that yield significant positive impact.
Mr. Elkus has also been deemed a Forbes 30 Under 30 social entrepreneur in 2020. It is a privilege and we're truly honored to interview you today. My name is Raul Kavoru. I'm a rising junior at St. Paul School in New Hampshire, and I'm the president of CompanyRoots.
My name is Srish Jasti, and I'm a rising freshman at the Wharton School at UPenn, and I'm from Homedale, New Jersey, and I'm the founder of CompanyRoots. So the first question that we always ask is, what are your company roots, and how do they help you in shaping your ideas and becoming the person you are today?
Well, thanks for having me both, guys.
Yeah.
I guess the best answer to that question is, Helen is a little bit of a different organization, and the thesis is that we've relied on basically institutions, so governments, think tanks, NGOs, to solve the world's problems for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And some of those have worked, some of them have not. But one of the things that Helen is based off of and that I've been thinking about and my COO, Sam, has been thinking about for our whole lives is that a lot of those institutions were built for the past. They were built during the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century. But there's something very different about the 21st century that we're living in, that the speed at which problems come about and that the speed at which we have to address those problems and solve them when they do come about, and like we're seeing with COVID, is fast accelerating. And it's never been like that before. So the idea was just there needs to be a new type of organization in the 21st century to solve the problems of the 21st century, that we don't have that type of organization. And that was the incubus of Helena. But it's beyond just Helena. It's in addition to running our own organization that solves important problems and does projects to solve problems, we ideally want to inspire other people to do the exact same thing. That if humanity is going to thrive for the next 100 years and address these critical issues, there can't just be one type of organization that does it. There has to be kind of a tidal wave of change across the spectrum, inside of government, the NGO sector, but also the Fortune 500 world and all of that.
Yeah, totally. One of the questions that I had is when you guys say we're addressing important societal problems, what quantifies what quantifies the word important? How would you describe it, and what is the qualities you're looking for when you attack a problem?
So the answer is it's impossible to do that, and there's been basically this has been an argument amongst humans for thousands and thousands of years. Is how do you rank a problem over another one? One of the toughest ways to do this is to think about future lives versus current lives, right? If you could press a button and save 1 million lives starting 100 years in the future, is that more important than 1 million lives today? So there is no answer to this question that the world believes, and every organization that tries to take on problems has to decide it amongst themselves. The more interesting thing for us is actually less about getting into the philosophical debate of whether we should focus on this issue or this issue on a moral level. One problem that Helena doesn't have is that is a lack of things to potentially do. The world, unfortunately, right now has a lot of things wrong with it. What we actually would really bias ourselves on is really one simple thing, which is if we're thinking about a potential project, how likely is it to work? Like beyond anything else, how likely are we to be able to operate and actually implement a solution to that problem? So, for example, when we just did a major project on COVID response. And if I could design a perfect project, it would be to prevent future pandemics.
Right.
The budget of the largest organization that focuses on bioterrorism is a little bit smaller than the average budget of a McDonald's franchise. So I would solve that problem. I would try to create an organization or create an initiative that addresses the fundamental and underlying problems that can cause unmitigated spread of pandemics. However, when we're sitting, during the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, and we notice price gouging going on in PPE, that hospitals that need masks, ventilators, the here and now problem, and we realized that Helena was in a privileged position to very quickly raise money, buy up this PPE, and then transfer it to the hospitals that weren't going to get it. It was way outweighed by the fact that we could actually do this project now and we could be efficient and competitive compared to anybody else, that we were in a unique position to actually execute on it. So at least for the short term, you kind of have to earn your place to get to decide at the highest of levels whether to do one project over another. And oftentimes it's actually just there's a multitude of things that one could do or one could address. And a lot of people actually get lost in the philosophy of it and never actually get down to addressing one person's life or actually implementing one project. So we spend the vast majority of our time just figuring out feasibility and operational capabilities as opposed to doing the theoretical work.
Yeah, and I love that. It's like, problem and quick response and just working on it immediately.
Yeah. So some of your projects right now are like the COVID-19 response, as you said, and America in One Room, Factory in the Sky, and Shield. So can you describe some of these projects and more specifically how you saw that they were a right fit for Helena?
Yeah, so the first project we did dealt in what's called carbon capture. And I'll just tell you a little bit about the problem, which is that even if we're going to, even if we could press a button in society and completely prevent all CO2 from going into the atmosphere right now, the worst effects of climate change will still happen. And the reason why is there's an excess of carbon dioxide stuck in the atmosphere that we need to remove at industrial levels in order to affect change at the level that the Paris Accords needed to in order to address climate change. Mm-hmm. So our first project focused on basically identifying the most viable technology that could do this, that could remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, but then actually do something with that carbon dioxide, whether it's storing it underground or selling it, that could in some way make money or at least be supported by the capital markets. And the idea behind that was you can't just make this a nonprofit project. It has to be a business. You have to have scale. And the only way to get scale in an industry like this, unfortunately, is for the price per ton of carbon that's being removed to get to a certain level. So what we did was basically find whoever we felt was doing this at the highest levels. And it was these two guys, Christoph Gerwald and Jan Workboxer, who had founded Climeworks, and then support them from every angle humanly possible. So that was the first project. And I can go into the other ones as well, but just to flag them, what was the problem for the Shield project? Well, it's that the electrical grid is extremely vulnerable. It can be hacked very easily, or relatively easily. Accidents can occur, like a squirrel falling on a tree branch that helped cause the northeastern blackout, and it can be physically attacked. And then a really scary one is a solar storm, that the sun can actually emit what's called a coronal mass ejection. And it happens like clockwork. The last one was in the 19th century called the Carrington event. Mm-hmm. And for that project, it was about identifying the core inadequacies with the electrical grid and then trying to find feasible legislation that we could actually help write and then pass to address those issues. So for that, we actually helped write and then pass 2 state bills in the state of California that were passed unanimously, as well as federal legislation and executive orders for the president. So that was a second project. American One Room I could go into, but the background's a little bit more complex, which is the decline of liberal democracy around the world and what is causing it. But I'll stop there because I don't want to take too much of the time.
Yeah. Okay. So one of my, just immediately what I'm thinking about is, for every social impact organization, you have this incredible team working behind it to keep it up and running. So what qualities are you looking for in people that are, forward thinking like your projects that you're attacking? And what atmosphere are you looking to create at Helena?
It's a great question. I think there's definitely a couple qualities. I'll just tell you my favorite one for lack of time that I think a lot of people don't have. And if people have this trait, I really get excited, which is when you're talking to somebody or let's just reverse it back where somebody's talking to you. Let's say you're having an argument with someone, you really believe something, and that person gives you a piece of empirical data that actually proves to you that your argument is wrong. So you're telling this person 1 + 1 = 3, I believe this, I really feel passionately about this. And then they actually write a mathematical proof of why 1 + 1 actually equals 2.
Yeah.
When you hear this, that instead of feeling anger or instead of feeling defensiveness, where you want to fight back against them, when you have the trait of actual gratitude, where you actually feel excited that you now know something is false, and then you now know the way to get forward, and then you feel empowered and a better person because of that. That's the trait that I most look for, and that I've found is one of the most rare things, especially unfortunately in the internet age, in which our attention spans are so low and emotion runs so high. So finding people, irrespective of their political ideas, irrespective of their religious ideas, people that actually just prize learning truth, and then switching their, changing their mind once they had learned that they were wrong. Yeah. For the work that we do, is extremely rare. But when we find people like that, I really try to hire them.
Yeah.
And
Rahul, sorry.
aside from Helena, aside from the team, Helena also partners with incredible visionaries, like your members, which include Evan Spiegel, who's the CEO of Snap, Ken Griffin, who's also the founder and CEO of Citadel, and Beatrice Finn, the executive director of ICANN. So more aside from your team, what's the process like in contacting your members and understanding that you kind of relate with them in terms of a forward-thinking mindset, and what role do they play in your organization?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So the membership is probably the most unique part of Helena compared to any other organization for one reason, which is we make no money from it. So it's not monetized. We don't do a conference. We don't sell access to the members, none of that. The members are there for one reason, which is that they're the best in the world at what they do or close to it. It's hard to always say that. And they want to use their assets, whether it's their brain, their pocketbook, their resources, their company, whatever they have access to at the highest levels, to enact solutions to big problems. Mm-hmm. And for us, that's through our project. So it's a very good fit. And we treat the members like peers, and they treat us like peers. So it's a really unique relationship in which there's no contractual basis in which a member has to work on a project. They do it because they want to do it.
Exactly.
So I guess the answer to your question is we have to find people that are okay with that, right? We have to find people that don't see joining an organization like us as a transactional thing, but they see it as actually just in service of solving important problems. And that's the biggest personality trait that we see. And then I think the other thing is I would say lateral thinking. So somebody who maybe they're the best in the world at this one thing, but they only want to focus on that. They only want to focus on the one topic in astrophysics that they've got a Nobel Prize in. And they actually aren't willing to use the brain power that they have or actually think laterally about how what they have discovered can affect change in other areas. We're less attracted to that. And the reason why is that we don't know in advance what types of projects we want to do. We usually figure that out from the members. So if we have people that are only really emotionally or intellectually limited to one field and don't want to work on other things, they're going to be less of a fit for the organization. And then the overall answer to your question is, we actually don't really have a set yet methodology or rules that we stick to, like the Bible, for adding members. A lot of it is actually from just the in-person interactions we've had with them, where we feel like this is somebody that we'd like to be stuck in an airport with and wouldn't be angry if we did, or that we'd actually wouldn't mind spending the next 5 to 10 years of our lives working with at a high level. And a lot of that comes down to personality fit. So it's very practical, very operational, and less theoretical for us.
Yeah. It actually kind of makes sense with something I've heard a little while ago. Is like, if you're hiring somebody, then you're going to hire somebody where you're like, you bring them in the next day and they're already trying to work on something and you haven't even told them what to do yet. So
I think people who really have a knack for solving problems without necessarily being assigned to do it, I think is an extremely important trait that we look for. It's not the only one, but it's definitely one of them.
Yeah. So one of the things was, while I was looking through your websites, I found a ton of impactful quotes. So if you were to describe Helena's value in one quote, which would you choose and why?
Oh, describe our value in one quote. Wow.
Or maybe you can get back to us with that one.
No, it's a really good question, and there's a lot of quotes I really like. I would say I might be paraphrasing, but there's an amazing Italian architect named Renzo Piano, who I saw, and he had a quote that actually I was watching a talk of his and I just wrote it down, which is that the only tradition is the new. And I might be paraphrasing that wrong, but that you should create a tradition around doing things that are new. Basically create an anti-tradition. That oftentimes traditions become addictions in which you do the same thing over and over again, and it doesn't lead to any progress. And I just found this very fascinating, that you can have a sturdy and long-term organization that is centered around this idea that you can constantly iterate and constantly do new things, and you're not scared for that. And I think that is actually kind of like, to me, a business version of the fountain of youth. That if you can create longevity out of the idea of seeking newness and seeking innovation and seeking a new idea at all junctures, then that's extremely valuable. And I would hope that we could be defined by that. I guess time will tell. We're a young organization, and my hope is that we're around for many, many decades, if not longer. And I think one of the keys for us to get there is to follow advice like that.
Yeah, and it seems like you have a lot of books behind you, so you definitely must have a lot of insightful quotes. But we always end off on the same question in our interviews. What advice would you give to the current generation of high school students that would like to start the process to make a positive impact on society? And how do you recommend they start this process?
For me, it's really simple, which is just read. I mean, reading has completely taken over my life. And what I've discovered from reading, and it's not to say as an insult to young people, I mean, it's something that I learned myself, is how wrong you can be about certain assumptions about the world. And the only way to, I wouldn't say become right, because it's very challenging to get to that point if possible at all, is to read, and is to basically take the best ideas that humans have ever come up with over thousands and thousands of years that we have access to them, and then stick them in your brain. And you still want to break the rules. That's great. But at least know the rules before you break them and know what you're breaking. And I think that's what reading can do to you, and do for you. Every person I've met that I who's older, who has had a lot of success and has done so in really nuanced and complex ways, I haven't really met any of them that haven't read voraciously. I think that is one of the unifying traits. It's so simple. It's really hard. It's kind of like working out and being fit, right? If your body's fit, that you can't buy that. You can't get a cosmetic surgery that it makes you actually fit. And it's the same thing with your brain. So you have to put in the work. But just when I started really reading seriously, I couldn't get through a page or two without losing my attention span. And this is a really boring answer, but just extremely hard work, spending the time reading books that have topics that you disagree with, about maybe fields that you find really boring. Those are the ones that are going to have the highest kind of intellectual output, and it's going to make you so much more resourced, especially if you're a CEO, on how to deal with human nature, how to understand the problems that you're trying to solve in your business or externally. So I would just say read. It's the simplest thing I could say.
Thank you for letting us interview today.